It's always exciting to me when I see those first signs of spring, like the earliest daffodils, pushing forth their smiling faces, defying winter's hold on the garden. You know, we as Americans have always had a love and appreciation for flowers, ever since the beginning when this country was settled. Despite rigorous hard work, often from sun up to sundown, settlers always seem to find time to plant beautiful flowers, like the daffodil. These are yearly reminders to me of just how resilient and tough our pioneer ancestors were. Today, we'll visit the South, where these first signs of spring are in full bloom. There we'll drop in on a frontier town known as Old Washington and see how the daffodils have continued to prosper for over 180 years. We'll also meet a couple who have devoted much of their lives to daffodils by growing and showing them. And I'll take you behind the scenes of the Southern Regional Daffodil Show, where you'll see some blue ribbon blooms. And we'll see how you can capture the beauty of spring in your home. All coming up next. Over the years, I've really come to appreciate flowers that are easy to grow. I guess that's why the daffodil has become one of my favorites. I also like it because it comes as close to representing spring as any flower I know. Now, I'm not the only one that feels this way. Dick and Gertie Butler have been longtime daffodil enthusiasts, and I think they personify something that's special about gardening. It can truly be a lifelong pursuit. And meeting and talking with people like them who've become experts can help you with plants you may want to grow in your own garden.
We've been growing daffodils, Alan, for something over 40 years. And although we didn't have the 7 or 8 levels that we had then, we grew a lot of daffodils as well as irises and daylilies. I try to plant some every year. I may buy 100 at a time, sometimes even as many as 250 at a time, and I get those from one nursery. If I buy more expensive ones that may cost as much as $40, $50, $60, $75 a bulb, I don't buy those by the hundreds. I buy those for about 3 at a time, maybe. And I buy those for my wife, who is an excellent exhibitor and very competitive and has won lots of prizes, both at national shows, regional shows, and local shows.
I often hear people say, I love daffodils, but they only bloom once, and they only bloom for such a short period of time. Well, Dick confirmed a practice that I've used in my garden for years, which helps extend the season.
What I've done over the years is try to get a whole lot of real early season bloomers, then a whole lot of mid-season, and then a whole lot of late season, and that will extend your season of blooming daffodils for at least a full month.
I've come to love these with the pink centers. I love this salmony pink color on the trumpet. There's really not much to planting daffodils. It's all a matter of setting aside a beautiful fall day and getting the bulbs in the ground. When I plant, I like to plant 25 to 50 bulbs of the same variety in an informal drift. I planted a variety called Ice Volleys in a bed across the front of one of my fences, and the display was spectacular. About the only fertilizing I do is once the flowers are up, I sprinkle a little fertilizer around them. This helps feed the foliage, and it's the foliage that reinvigorates the bulb for bloom next year.
I usually start with having a container with a little bit of water, not much, so it won't be heavy. And as I cut each flower, I want to put it to give it water. So it's very important to really groom a show flower. And walking through the yard, you'll look at every angle on every flower, and you'll leave 75 or 80% of them, but there'll be a few special ones. It is difficult. It's difficult. Mentally, it's difficult to keep them straight. But I have kind of a system on the special ones. I have a rock, and I'll put the variety on the rock, and it looks like a little cemetery. But it makes me know that that's the right one.
How long have you been showing daffodils?
Well, since I belonged to the garden club a long time ago, but not until we joined the American Daffodil Society to really compete. And I'll work hard tonight.
How late will you work?
I work till about 10 o'clock.
Are you getting excited?
I always get excited.
Does your adrenaline begin to flow because
yes,
of
it does. When I wake up at 6:30 in the morning instead of 7:30, I'm ready to go.
How competitive is Gertie?
She's very competitive, and I was amused the other day at a dinner after all the judging. There were two men that sat right next to us who had won the gold quin. Now, Gertie has won the silver quin, but you have to exhibit that and win that at a national convention to win the gold. And when she won this prize for the top cyclamenius, two men across the table said, "Gee, we haven't won that one." So she was pretty competitive and pretty pleased that she had won that.
Are the shows competitive?
Oh, goodness. Yes, they are. And you know, I've always been competitive, not in just flowers and other things. It's just, I guess it's just part of it.
After you've looked at all of your daffodils and you've chosen the few for the show, can you be objective about who the winners are?
Oh, you bet I can. I really can. Of course, there's a friend down in Texas. We have the same category. We like to win the red, white, and blue ribbon, which is an American daffodil on United States hybridizers. And Rodney Armstrong down in Texas, and we'll try to get that award every time.
I got one.
You got it.
There you go.
Yeah, that is.
Bring home the blue.
All right.
You don't have to grow daffodils on the scale that Dick and Gertie have to enjoy them. Just a few around the house are a nice reminder that spring is finally here.
Let's go.
With their flowers selected and the car loaded, there's no turning back now. Dick and Gertie are off to the show, and so is one of Gertie's toughest competitors. You'll meet him next. But before that, we'll take a scenic side trip down the old Southwest Trail to the edge of the American frontier, where the daffodils grow wild and the residents celebrate with the annual Jonquil Festival. Long ago, this was a thriving frontier town where travelers stopped off to resupply before heading out for adventure in the New West. But today, the population of Washington, Arkansas is about 148, and its most illustrious citizens are probably these daffodils, drawing literally thousands of people each year to the annual Jonquil Festival, the first weekend in March. The blooms are literally everywhere. It's apparent they've prospered. Some of what you see here are wild daffodils, and many are heirloom varieties, and then there are a few modern hybrids. Some of these flowers are the kinds you would have seen around the homes of the earliest colonists. Some even go back as far as the 1600s. Here in front of the old Confederate Capitol, a lot of the heirloom varieties are growing, like this one called the Lent Lily. Many of them have interesting names, like this one called Butter and Eggs. Then there's Campernell, Little Sweetie, and Old Pheasant Eye. What we call these beautiful little flowers can sometimes be a bit confusing. Some call them jonquils, others daffodils, and I've even heard them called buttercups. Whatever name you choose, it's important to realize that they're actually Narcissus, a big family of plants. I asked longtime resident of the area and historic preservationist Parker Westbrook about the daffodils. Parker, how long have daffodils been a part of Washington?
Gosh, from time immemorial in Washington, Arkansas, the jonquils have been here. Apparently the people who came from the Middle Eastern states brought flowers, plants, trees with them from the homes that they had known in Virginia, Tennessee, South Carolina. So I think what we're seeing is an outgrowth of all of the wonderful things that they brought with them and that they have virtually just gone wild all over the city of Washington. This is the 30th year that the Jonquil Festival has been taking place here in Washington. It was started by our foundation as a means of raising funds to support ourselves with. Well, Washington is on the Southwest Trail, which went from St. Louis to Fulton on the Red River. It was very important in the development of the area because, in theory, Washington is and was considered to be the last civilized stopping off place before you went into Mexico. So it was very significant in the people who migrated toward the west because this was the last place they could get provisions and before they went into unknown territory, which at that time was even Mexico. And we allege, and there's some proof of it, that the Texas Revolution was planned. Parts of it were planned here in Washington, Arkansas.
Now, Jim Bowie actually made his home here for a while,
Jim Bowie was here and came through town and talked with Mr. James Black, the local blacksmith who had come down from Philadelphia. Actually, he was a silversmith also. And so Mr. James Bowie commissioned James Black to make him a knife of a design that he presented. Mr. Bowie went on wherever he was going, came back about 6 weeks later, and not only had Mr. James Black crafted the knife which Bowie ordered, but he crafted a knife which he considered better and said, "Mr. Bowie, try this knife." And so Bowie tried it and liked it, and that is the knife that became the Bowie knife.
We have people like Parker to thank for not only preserving the architecture of a place like this, but also its historic plants as well. You know, it's hard to beat the beauty and simplicity of a daffodil, and they're so resilient. They'll come back year after year. And if you plant some of these heirloom varieties, you can actually have an example of living history growing in your own garden. Now that we've seen how the daffodil moved west with the settlers, it's time to check back with Dick and Gertie and daffodil enthusiasts from around the country who are competing in the Daffodil Show. And that's what all of this is about. This is the Southern Regional Daffodil Show. And this year they have over 1,200 entries coming from several different states. With all of this diversity of bloom comes some intense but friendly competition.
It's very competitive. I was quite surprised when I first started showing how competitive it really can be.
Rodney Armstrong is an avid grower of daffodils and has been exhibiting them in competitions for quite some time now. And Gertie Butler is always one of his strongest competitors.
I've been competing with Gertie for years and years and years. She likes to show two collections that I like to show also. And one is what's called the American Bred Collection. It's a collection of 5 daffodils that were all hybridized and originated by American growers. And she always has an American bred collection. When I come to Conway, I know if I have an American bred collection, Gertie's going to be my competition.
Whether or not you participate in the competition, these shows can be very inspiring. It's a great place to pick out individual daffodils or combinations for planting in your garden this fall for bloom next spring. When we come back, I'll show you some of the many types of daffodils available, and the judge's decision is in. Find out how Gertie did at the Daffodil Show. If you think daffodils are just those yellow flowers that pop up in your garden in spring, think again. Actually, there are 12 divisions of these little guys, set by the Royal Horticultural Society in Great Britain, and each category has its own unique characteristics. Let's take a look at a few of them. Many of us refer to daffodils as jonquils. Well, this name actually comes from Division 7, or Jonquilla. This is the Tazetta group. It's Division 8. Now, I like it because there are multiple small blooms on a single stem. Now these are really interesting. This is division 11, the split corona division, and you can see the trumpet part of the daffodil is actually split, giving it a very ruffled appearance. And if you like small flowers, almost every division is represented in miniature. As you can see, the hybridizers have been pretty busy over the past 150 years or so. Well, it sounds like the judges are just about ready. What's great about this is that there's so many different classifications, everyone has an opportunity to be a winner.
This is Ice Wing, just a class 5. Got a nice back blue.
With prizes in hand, Gertie chalks up another victory this season. Just one of the many reasons growing daffodils gives her pleasure. But you don't have to raise daffodils for competing on the judges' table. You can plant them in your own garden for enjoyment and beauty year after year. Because of chilly temperatures this time of year, enjoying a bouquet of these indoors can be very refreshing. However, knowing a few tips on how to use these as cut flowers can make your flower arranging more successful. First, it's important to know that the sap that flows out of the ends of the stems of daffodils is detrimental to most other flowers. Compounds in the sap will cause other flowers, if used with daffodils, to go limp or wilt. So it's best to use all daffodils in an arrangement, or set them aside for 12 hours in a separate container, changing the water a couple of times before mixing them with other flowers. When arranging them, I think one of the most effective ways they can be used is to bundle them in tight bunches or groups like this, all of the same variety, like this pink variety called Salome. Since their stems can be easily broken or bent, grouping them with shortened stems and binding them together with a rubber band near the flower heads can make a handsome presentation. Longer stemmed flowers work better if placed in a vase or a container with a wire mesh, such as chicken wire. This method will allow you to turn their faces in the direction you want, and you can fill in between the flowers with an evergreen, like the classic boxwood, to help set off the blooms. Daffodils are such a joy to have in the spring, both in your garden and your home. This is the paper white Narcissus. It's actually a form of daffodil, so to speak, and it's a bulb that will produce a living bouquet for your home. It's all right here in this little brown wrapper, a total package from nature. You see the flower, stem, and leaves are already formed, and all it takes is time and a little water to coax it out. I try to plant paper whites at 2-week intervals throughout the fall, so I can have containers of them blooming constantly. I also buy extra bulbs so I can have them blooming after the holidays. I just store them in my refrigerator until I'm ready to plant them. These bulbs will grow in anything. Nutrient really isn't an issue when it comes to forcing them to flower. They'll grow in sand or gravel, or for that matter, just plain water, but I prefer to use a basic potting soil. I pack as many bulbs as I can into a container, and the soil will help anchor them. It'll also serve as a medium for sowing ryegrass seed around them. The grass will provide a nice texture, and the bright fresh green is always a welcome sight during the winter. Now with just a little water, this grass will germinate within a week, and the paper whites can be blooming within 4 weeks. If I want to accelerate that, all I have to do is put them in a warmer room with brighter light. Water is critical. You want to keep the soil saturated around the bulbs, because if they get too dry, it can keep them from flowering. No matter where you live, hopefully sometime this spring you'll enjoy the beauty of daffodils. It might be along a roadside, as we saw in historic Washington, Arkansas, where daffodils remain a part of the landscape of our pioneer ancestors. Or perhaps growing in a backyard, where gardeners like Dick and Gertie Butler have inspired us with their over 40 years of enthusiasm and knowledge of this classic spring flower. Or in a cheerful bouquet such as this, one that you can share with friends. As these flowers continue to open over the next few days, they'll become even more radiant. I hope you've enjoyed this little peek into early spring and discovered some ideas that you can use in your own garden. From the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.